So we've been doing this candidate cycle now. This is our 6th of 8 candidates, Veselin Topalov. And Topalov was granted access to the candidates tournament through his rating. So he has a very high rating. But before I get to that, I want to bring you up to date on some chess news. I don't know if you're aware, but the U.S. Treasury designated Kirsan Ayumazov for their sanctions list. What that means is if he has any assets in the United States, they are frozen, and that all people in the United States are discouraged from having any kind of transactions with him. About 20 years to the day after Kirsan Ayumazov was elected FIDE president, maybe he was celebrating his anniversary, he gets this bombshell. And of course, the World Chess Championship is supposed to be in St. Louis, but how is he going to make arrangements and sign a contract for that? In fact, this came out the eve of when he was supposed to travel to St. Louis to finalize that contract. I think he still flew to the U.S. It's not like he was going to be arrested on site. It's just that from a business perspective, his assets, any foreign assets that the United States had jurisdiction over, will get frozen. So Kirsan decided that he would step down while he is on the sanction list, and that his powers would therefore transfer to FIDE's executive vice president, pictured there with Kirsan, and his name is Georgios Makropoulos from Greece originally. I want you to remember that name. He's going to come up a couple more times, and if you pay attention to his photo, you might see him in a couple more pictures. He's no stranger to the chess world. He's been around for quite a while. So he is the current acting head of FIDE. Kirsan, I guess, finished negotiations. I haven't heard anything about the World Chess Championship being moved to another country, but there is a possibility, I suppose. So we're keeping our eyes open for that. But let's get back to the candidates tournament. So the candidates field is pretty much set. Although I told you that last time Topalov might not accept the offer because the tournament's supposed to be in Moscow. He's not altogether happy about that. So he's waiting to get the contract. But given his track record in the candidate cycle, I can't see him saying no. He participated in tournaments in Russia in 2011, 2013, including the candidates tournament when it was held in Russia last time. So I can't see him bowing out, but there is a distinct possibility. And if he says no, the first alternate is Dmitry Yakovenko, who was third in the Chess Grand Prix. And if Yakovenko says no, it goes to the next highest rated player. Do we know who that is? Not Wesley So. Oh, it's actually in this table here. Goes to Kramnik. And believe me when I tell you, there is no way that Topalov wants his spot to go to Kramnik. If there's any chance of that, that in itself might deter him. Now, I've been keeping track of the monthly posted ratings for the players for the past year, trying to anticipate who would get in by rating. And I noticed something pretty interesting, and it's that Topalov has maintained the second highest average rating for the entire year. His rating this year has ranged from 2798 to 2813. Consistency. And number 2 in the world, second only to Magnus Carlsen. He has had an up and down year. He won Norway Chess. He did poorly in the recent London Chess Classic. But his rating has consistently been in the top 3 in the world. And he has performed very well. So he certainly deserves a spot in the candidates tournament. And we're going to find out a little bit about his background, and you'll see that he is in many ways a perennial candidate. So let's start as we usually do by where he was born. Topalov is of Bulgarian descent, born in Rus, Bulgaria in 1975. Rus is actually right on the border with Romania. Rus is separated from Romania by the Danube River. The Danube forms the border between those two countries. So very, very closer to Bucharest, the capital of Romania, than he is to Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. Also, you'll note that Bulgaria is placed on a land route leading from Turkey to Western Europe, and this has come up quite a bit recently with the Syrian migrant crisis. Bulgaria has had a difficult time trying to deal with a number of refugees that have come through the country on their way to Germany, Austria, France, United Kingdom, etc. Greece obviously has borne the brunt of it, but with all the boats sinking in the Aegean Sea, there have been more land crossings, and also human smuggling is apparently cheaper by land. So Bulgaria is having a tough time, but that hasn't affected Topalov in any way, shape, or form because he's been living in Spain for probably the last 15 years. So he still participates in tournaments in Bulgaria from time to time, but it hasn't affected Topalov personally. I cannot tell you anything about Veselin Topalov without talking about Silvio Danailov. According to, we don't know very much about Topalov's childhood. We know that he started learning chess at age 8 from his father, and that he would wait for his father to come home from work so that they could play chess. We know that he showed promise at a very young age. We know that at age 12, he started working with then master, now international master, Danailov. And we know that Topalov had a tough childhood. I don't exactly know what that means. Whether he was abused, neglected, I have no clue. But the idea is that from about age 12, he basically lived with Danailov and saw him more as a father figure. And Danailov is directly responsible for Topalov's continued development and acts as his manager to this day. So I want to tell you a little bit about Danailov because you can't understand Topalov without understanding Danailov because Danailov's ideas have influenced Topalov quite a bit. So supposedly, Topalov splits his winnings 50-50 with Danailov. That's a pretty uncommon arrangement for a manager where 10 or 20% is maybe more the norm or just a salary. Second, Danailov has been the president of the European Chess Union for many years, and he was partly responsible for getting the European Union to adopt a resolution supporting the Chess in Schools program to have chess added to the curriculum of member nations, particularly in elementary schools. He also proposed the Sophia rules. Has anyone heard of the Sophia rules? The Sophia rules concern draws, and they state, quote, "The players should not offer draws directly to their opponents. Draw offers will be allowed only through the chief arbiter in 3 cases, a triple repetition of the position, a perpetual check, and in theoretically drawn positions." Now, these rules were first implemented at a tournament in Sofia called the MTel Masters in 2005 and 2006, and they led to sharper games, and it's credited for bringing in more sponsorship dollars for chess. Classical chess had gone through a bit of a funk in the early 2000s. You know, you had the whole PCA versus FIDE thing. And to hear Topalov tell it, part of the problem was the fact that tournaments were not really anxious to sponsor, or companies were not really anxious to sponsor tournaments where Garry Kasparov was going to participate because he was just going to go dominate, and there wouldn't really be this intrigue. And so Topalov says that Kasparov's retirement, coupled with the introduction of the Sophia rules, really led to an increase in sponsorship dollars and interest in chess. Now, I'll let you be the judge of that, but I want you to know that Danailov has been personally responsible for Topalov's development since Topalov was 12 years old. So we're talking 25 years or so here, first. Second, Danailov is a very active figure in chess circles, particularly European chess circles. You see him quite closely to Garry Kasparov there. And, as Topalov is lifting his victory trophy, there's Danailov, holding it up with him. So I can't talk about Topalov without first establishing the supporting cast, and that's Georgios Makropoulos and then Silvio Danailov. Now, we do have 5 games to go over with you this evening, and the first one is the longest one, so we're just going to do 1 game during this first interlude, and it's against the aforementioned Kasparov, and it's one of Topalov's earliest successes. He's had 3 wins over Kasparov in classical chess in his career. This was the second of those wins. And I've placed a circle for you around that night. Spoiler alert, keep an eye on that night. And as always for this analysis, I'm going to relegate the stage here to Warren.
Yeah, the Sophia rules really don't seem to have caught on, although I see St. Louis oftentimes, almost every tournament I've seen there, implements a rule where you're not allowed to offer a draw before move 30. So St. Louis kind of does their version of the Sophia rules. Let's get into this game. So Topalov was just 21 at the time, and like Lucas mentioned, he'd already beaten Kasparov once, although this game was in much better style, I would say. This was a hell of a statement Topalov made with this. I mean, beating Kasparov like that's something you're going to be proud of. You know? So Kasparov, of course, plays his Najdorf, and Topalov plays Fischer's favorite line, Sozin. So Kasparov plays a really sharp variation. I mean, later in his career, he favored an early b5, so instead of knight d7, just b5 here. Even though it doesn't develop a piece, it's surprisingly kind of a calmer line. With knight bd7, it's provocative because it makes white really want to play f4, f5, and open up this diagonal for the bishop. And of course, f5. Black does not want to take on f5 and open the f file too, so e5 is more or less forced. Now queen h5. Nice intermezzo, which activates the queen. Kind of forces some congestion in black's position because after queen e7, stopping mate, now white can go back. Now, the knight's immune because rook e1 would cause black death on the e file. So black has to retreat. And now white has a really clever move. I'll see if you can find it. Now, I'm sure Topalov had already known about this move before the game even began. This is pretty much still opening theory.
Can you push the pawn?
F6, you mean?
Well, f6, I think black can play g takes f6.
Oh, knight c6.
Yeah. If you were thinking about Lucas's comments earlier, you might have considered this,
Oh,
right?
that knight.
Yeah. So the problem for black is that the knight's immune because of the fork with the rook on a8 and king on e8.
So just like to point out, the knight was immune on d4, the knight is immune on c6.
It's a heck of a knight. And now you might wonder why white even played that because, you know, what are you going to do, go knight b4? You might be able to guess he did not play knight b4.
Bishop d4. Or d5, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, no, we still can't take them.
White just simply reinforces the knight.
Yeah.
So a5. No, a5 I think is probably a slight inaccuracy. It looks like bishop d7 is probably your black's best shot here because now we really are threatening to just take the knight. So white's going to have to play a move like knight b4, and then it's more complicated. It's not perfect for black given white's domination over d5 square, and the f7 square is kind of weak. But at least white's knight will have to go back, right?
Yeah, and black can play bishop e7 and maybe get out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the situation's not perfect, but it looks better. And the computer thinks so too. It's kind of unclear. But anyway, a5. The idea of a5 is to try to stop the knight from being able to get out, so when black attacks the next time, it'll be more difficult. But bishop g5. This is a really clever move. So why do you think Topalov played his bishop to the square?
Maybe with the idea of going to f6 with the pawn? Or...
No, because f6, black can play like g6.
It prevents bishop e7, doesn't it?
Well, true, but I don't think black would want to do that. So if we go back to this position, black basically has a real threat here. Black to play would have a very strong move.
I mean, wouldn't it be bishop d7?
Yeah, bishop d7.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, or what he played in the game later with rook a6, and the knight doesn't have an escape square anymore. So black has a real threat. So given that, why would Topalov play bishop g5?
I mean, he has two options here, right? Knight e8, and so knight d8. He's attacking f7 twice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with bishop g5, he gives the knight to the a square. So now after Kasparov just attacks it, he just goes deeper into enemy territory. Now, by the way, for the record, bishop d7 would have been a stronger move. And then this forces white to play f6 and then knight e7. And it's incredibly messy, but white still doesn't have anything clear. This would have been better because Black has a big problem after knight d8 in that f7 square. He actually can't defend it, so he has to just move it. But now after knight f7, he's got other problems. Rook on h8 is hanging. Now another nice tactic. Saving the knight and exposing attack on the rook. And by the way, if Black were to take on g5, White would not take on g8. White has an even stronger move here. Because if White takes on g8, Black could take on f5. And
F takes g6.
Yeah, open the F file.
F takes g6, I think is good, but White has even better.
What about F6?
Yeah, f6.
You're threatening a
Fork,
fork, and that's
yeah.
catastrophe.
The threat of f7 is unfortunately pretty much unstoppable. If you play rook h8, you still lose because of f7, followed by queen f6, forking king and rook, right? So that's just devastating. So that pawn is just crushing. So that's the real threat here. So Black can't allow that. But now Black has problems on the f file, right?
Ouch.
And yeah, Black is basically forced to give up the queen because a move like king e7, White would just take on g6, and the threats on f6 and the hanging bishop, Black really can't do anything. So unfortunately, he has to give up the queen. Now, Black does have some compensation here, but it's not enough. Topalov doesn't mind giving up the rook for the bishop because this will mean that Black's pawns on f6 and e5 will be fixed, right? Because with the light square bishop, Black can maybe hope for some kind of mobility. Although Black might have some hope of holding here, unfortunately he's just too uncoordinated. Topalov just converts easily here. White's domination over the light squares makes it hard for Black to put up much resistance. And now White has his passed a pawn. There's not much counterplay left. And he just resigned at this point. White threatens a6, a7, and then just queen. And Black really can't do anything about that. So, pretty fun game. I mean, it's not very often you get to hang your knight so many times against Kasparov and win in such style. I mean, having knight on the back rank in the middle game is you can count on the fingers of one hand games like that. I mean, and Kasparov really only made, the one mistake, rook a6. I mean, if bishop d7, it seems like Black is okay. I mean, there have been several games in the database since then where Black has played bishop d7 and gotten pretty decent results. So just one mistake, and then Topalov took it and won. I mean, Topalov was really precise. If you look at it with, Stockfish, after Kasparov played rook a6, the rest of the game, Topalov was just winning, apparently. So, really precise. I mean, he made it look easy, but, he found some important moves there. Knight f7, bishop back, knight g5, right? It was very nice. So any questions on this game? Now, this game was not an exception for Topalov, by the way. He was a sharp player, is a sharp player. He's not exactly a Capablanca, put it that way.
No, that's an understatement. Yeah, so as Warren gets at, Topalov is known for being, a pretty aggressive player, and we'll see more examples of that. We'll also see some exceptions to that, some very careful exceptions to that a little later on. Before you feel too bad for Garry Kasparov, know that his lifetime record against Topalov is +10 -3 = 14. So, three losses in their 13-year overlap or so that they had in their active careers is not too shabby. So Topalov, despite starting chess at around age 8, which is a little later than than some of the other players we've covered, Karawanov 5, Karpov 6, it seems like a lot of the players we've talked about have been 5, 6, 7 years old when they start playing. Nakamura was 5. Topalov at 8, by this time he was 13 years old, he had the same level of progress after 5 years that some of these other players had after 7 years. So he caught up. And he was world under 14 champion. That was in Puerto Rico in 1989. And he was champion at that. He got his GM title in 1992, so he's around 17 years old, which is a little later than some of the other players we've talked about. Obviously, Karyakin was freakishly young when he wasn't even 13 years old when he got the title. So by that standard, it seems like Topalov would have, not had the same career trajectory. But Topalov really got serious about chess, he says, around age 25. Around age 25, Topalov moved to Spain, and at that time, he started considering chess professionally. Now, that's later. Obviously, you have Anish Giri, who at 2020 probably decided to be a pro, and Wei Yi, who's 16 now and is probably already envisioning being a professional chess player. Topalov was a little bit later, but and it's really surprising that he has been so dominant from about 2001, 2002, all the way through the present. He's at his lulls, obviously, but he's been very, very strong throughout that period. So he was named captain of the Bulgarian team in 1994 at the age of 18, 19 years old. He is still captain of the Bulgarian team. That was his first, and he got his first win over Kasparov in 94 when he beat him on board one at the Olympiad, which is a pretty big deal. 1999 was his first chance at the World Chess Championship. Now, you'll remember that at the time, the PCA and FIDE are split. So Kasparov and a couple of other players are not participating in the, Nigel Short in particular, are not participating in FIDE. But in that divided time, FIDE, in their infinite wisdom to try to get more excitement into chess, they decide that instead of match play, they're going to use elimination tournaments to decide champions. And in 1999, Topalov was eliminated from the World Chess Championship cycle by Vladimir Kramnik, who was playing in his last cycle. So 1999, Topalov was eliminated by Kramnik, and obviously there's a rivalry there. Eliminated by Kramnik, I don't know that this was the start of their rivalry. Perhaps 2006 would be more accurate. We're going to get to that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. But does anybody remember who won the FIDE World Championship this year?
Oh, what year was this?
2000? 1999, 2000.
Was that the year Kazimodonov won it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Or wait, no, it was Ponomaryov. No.
Ponomaryov?
Ponomaryov.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Ponomaryov. Kazimodonov is later. We'll get to that. Now, I told you that Topalov is a perennial candidate. 1999 was his first candidate cycle, but he's participated in pretty much every single candidate cycle since then. And he never participated in a PCA World Championship. It's always FIDE. And in 2000, it was again a knockout tournament. You see he made it all the way to the quarterfinals, where he's eliminated by Khalifman. And then 2002 was eliminated in the fourth round by Shirov. So these knockout tournaments not going so well for him, but getting good experience. And by 2004, he's coming in as the number 1 seed. He is the highest rated player in FIDE, not named Garry Kasparov or Vladimir Kramnik, and he's participating in this cycle. And he's looking really good, but he's eliminated by Kazimdzhanov in the semifinals. And Kazimdzhanov goes on to win the championship, much to everybody's surprise, because he came in as the 28th seed. And he beat all 4 of the top seeds on his way to winning the tournament. This was very unexpected. A lot of people were predicting this was going to be the year to bring glory to England and England's chess program, but that didn't quite happen. Of course, Topalov was certainly disappointed with his result as well. So this is 2004. 2005, Topalov is establishing himself as one of the top players in the world. He wins the MTel Masters. Now that is the tournament in Sofia in Bulgaria that I was telling you about earlier, the first to employ the Sofia rules, which is trying to dissuade draws. Certainly could have used that at the London Chess Classic. And so he won clear first over a very strong field, over some of the top-rated players in the world. And it looked like 2005 was going to be his year, and it was in many senses. But before I get to his win in the World Chess Championship in 2005, the divided championship. I want to show, or have Warren show you, a couple of games from this MTel Masters where you're going to see Topalov doing very well against Ponomarev, former world champion, and Viswanathan Anand, former and future world champion.
Yeah, these two games are more of just Topalov being Topalov, basically. After seeing the game against Kasparov, you can probably tell where this is going. Starts off a little bit more different this time. You have a Queen's Indian, but Topalov doesn't play this in a positional manner. So e4, I mean, it's pretty ambitious. I mean, typically in this opening, you'll see white play bishop g2, knight e5, that kind of thing. So he's playing this altogether differently. He's aiming to maybe not even fianchetto his bishop at all, right? Put it on d3 instead, and attack on the king side. Now, while possible, this is risky, and we'll see Ponomarev misses a better defensive chance, but Topalov doesn't mind taking risks. So Ponomarev plays the principal move. This frees up c6 square for the knight and tries to break open the center, right? When you're getting attacked on a wing, you want to try to counterattack in the center. That's the principle. Now h4, hinting at maybe some possible, classic bishop sacrifices, right? With bishop h7, knight g5, queen h5, maybe. So Ponomarev forgoes these possibilities. But now he hints at queen c2 ideas, which is also very dangerous because, for example, for white's move here, you could play queen c2 and have g6 h5, right? Prying open that king side. So black is under some serious pressure, and he doesn't really deal with it quite right. So problem with f5 is it doesn't really stop Topalov's idea. Now, more precise, in retrospect, would have been knight d7. So now if queen c2, we can play f5, and if white takes, we can take with a knight and guard that h7 square. The game is by no means clear, but I think this is going to give black better chances, and Stockfish thinks this is probably the best option. So the problem with playing f5 right away is that this h7 square is not defensible now. So d4. Now knight g5. This guards f7, so white just threatens mate. Unfortunately, black doesn't have a lot of choice. He's got to take it. But now white still has big threats in connection with rook h8, right? Bishop f4. And the king is basically got to get rid of dodge. If you don't do that, then queen g6 followed by rook h8 looks devastating. So the king has to get out immediately. Yeah, exactly. But now queen g6 and queen g7, and black has problems with this skewer. And now white to play. What's the cleanest way to finish up here?
What about just bishop to e4?
Bishop e4. So are you just threatening the rook?
Well, yeah, but you're taking squares away from the king. Maybe you can...
I'm thinking maybe black can consider c2. Yeah, I'm not sure this is so clear.
No, it's not.
Well, rook h5, I think queen d2, right? Or queen c1 maybe.
Can white just castle and get the rook over there?
Well, you can castle, but then after, say, knight c6, it doesn't seem so clear to me.
Oh yeah, the knight can block the d file. Yeah.
That doesn't work either. Queen can just block.
So you can actually just threaten checkmate in one here. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh.
The threat is queen c7 mate,
C7
right?
mate.
Now that bullet.
Yeah, it turns out black really can't stop this.
The knight can't help.
Queen e5, just king f1. Now queen e8, queen d8, and bishop e4. Right? Queen e4, just queen c7. Yep. So yeah, pretty crushing game. So any questions on this? Yeah, he makes it look easy. Then we'll see another crushing Queen's Indian game against Anand here.
Black doesn't expect to have that happen to him.
Yeah, generally
the whole
speaking,
idea
yeah.
is that is to avoid that sort of thing. Right?
If you're playing the Queen's Indian, you're not exactly going to expect this kind of attack. So again, Topalov goes for this e4 idea. This game, he's a bit more speculative, though. So knight g5, c5.
There's an f7.
Yeah, exactly. Knight g5 was very risky. I mean, the circumspect move would have been like bishop d3, right? But knight g5 kind of commits him to an attack because now black has all these threats on the long diagonal and just simple attack on d4. So he's kind of committed. So he has to play d5 first because you want to cut off this bishop. Now takes. Now he just took an f7. Now, although this works out for him, objectively it's slightly dubious. But like I've already said, Topalov didn't mind taking these kind of big risks. So castle. Bishop d6. Black isn't concerned about taking on d5. That pawn really isn't necessary. He'd like to more keep that a2, g8 diagonal close, right? So knight h4, trying to target the light squares. Now bishop c8. Now, although this move is fine, Stockfish doesn't see anything for white after knight d7. You know, if queen g6, just king g8, knight f5, just bishop f8, and Stockfish is not convinced.
But how do you develop that rook?
There's also bishop to c4 threatening to push the...
Looks like
Well,
you're just getting
the problem for white is black is going to play knight e5.
Oh.
And it's not clear what white can do. I mean, for example, if you take on h6, just takes, knight e5, and then knight g4.
Oh, cute.
So this isn't so great for white. Otherwise, it's not so clear. You play bishop h6, but then rook h7. And again, Stockfish is not impressed. Just king h8 next, and white's compensation does not look at all clear. So if Anand has basically just continued development, it's not really clear that Topalov really has full compensation.
Like rook e1 is interesting more after bishop f8.
Oh, you mean queen g6 and then rook e1?
Probably the computer has something against it.
Oh, with the idea of rook e7?
Yeah. And bishop takes h6, something like
But you can't because you need the bishop there to try to get...
I'm guessing just takes and then rook h7 or something.
that. Yeah, it's probably...
Maybe. Yeah, I guess you could take.
Then maybe take the rook with the bishop.
Uh,
Cannot take the rook. Take
Here?
the bishop with the rook. Yeah.
Maybe here.
Maybe just take it.
Take, and then can we take this guy maybe? I don't know. Or perhaps now we play king h8. Black does have this rook on h1 still hanging. So
But if you play king h8, then material is at this sort of moment equal.
well, white has the hanging bishop and this hanging rook, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I can't say this looks too good for white. This king will be weak too in the future.
not much around to defend it.
Yeah, I'm not even sure this was correct for black. I mean, maybe taking on d5 is too risky. Maybe just like rook h7 and king h8. Perhaps.
Well, then it might be possible to take the bishop on h6.
Here?
Well, rook e7 again, possibility. But okay, this is just an idea.
Yeah, no. Yeah, rook e1 would be an interesting one. But in any event, I guess, Stockfish wasn't too pleased with white's position after that. But he played bishop c8, which even this should be okay. It just looks less clear because now black still has these undeveloped pieces on the queen side, right? So it's maybe not quite as simple now. So rook e1, rook e6. So white would be very pleased if black were to lose yet another defender of the light squares. And here, if you take, you also lose this knight, right? So knight b4 takes, bishop c4, b5, trying to get this bishop off this diagonal. Now, bishop b7, it looks like it probably just loses. Apparently, though, the best move here would be held. I think it might have been rook b8.
You got to get rid of that bishop that's murdered.
I would think that rook f8 would work, though, really, because then you could do queen g6 and then knight f5.
Yeah, but rook b8 is maybe better.
So I think the idea of rook b8 was to be able to play rook b7 and guard that 7th rank.
Also, you attack the bishop.
So
But again,
even
maybe
here,
it is the same idea. Queen g6 and knight f5. The idea is bishop f8 and rook rook 12. Okay. Yes, then maybe that's maybe rook b8.
mm-hmm. Yeah, something like rook b8.
Yes, and now rook e7 doesn't work because of bishop takes f5.
Mm-hmm. Undermining the rook. So it's still not clear that white has anything concrete yet. But yeah, bishop b7 leads to some big problems, though. And knight g6 is the start of it. Simply attacking the rook and the bishop, and black can't play rook e8. So I'm not sure if Anand missed this or what. Now knight takes pawn. And Topalov actually missed what apparently is a clear win. So in the game he played rook e7, which is good, but he has even stronger here.
That seems appealing to me.
Queen f5, I'm not sure because you're pinning your rook, right? I'm assuming bishop f6 probably.
How about just taking the rook?
Taking the rook, I think.
Back to the queen.
Yeah, maybe take back with the queen. I'm wondering. Yeah, black probably can't get away with taking that because rook e1. Yeah. But I think he might be able to get away with taking this. I don't know if I see anything clear there. But apparently crushing here is rook e5. The threat is just simply taking the knight because we have bishop c4 after.
Oh, wow.
And if the knight moves, then we can take on e7. So black has some serious problems here. And yeah, apparently there's not really a good way to solve that. Yeah, in the game he took on e7, which is also good because now we can take on h8, right? Queen takes h8 is apparently just losing to rook d1. The threat of rook d6 is just devastating. So queen d4, at least this way, black can try to head for an endgame. But white does have an extra pawn. So black finally reached this endgame, but the extra white pawn on the king side is essentially enough for a white win here. Topalov gets the 2 pieces. Although it's still a little bit messy. The ending is fun. And Anand resigns, right?
Yeah.
G6, G7,
G8.
G8.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even with the extra queen, you can't do anything.
Every move comes, right? Kind of fun.
Oh, that's tough.
It's upsetting when you queen and you get
You
checked
queen
3 times in a
first,
row
you
and then
get
get mated,
checkmated.
right?
Back up.
Amazing.
I'm not sure if the times are accurate, but if they are, that'd be a pretty exciting finish if Topalov only had 5 seconds left. So any questions on that one? So Topalov was aggressive and not always in the soundest way. This was kind of a Tal-esque kind of game, you know. Not the Kasparov calculated everything kind of crushing win.
So 2005 was a breakout year for Topalov, and that culminated in a win in the FIDE World Chess Championship. Recall that the chess championship is still divided. Kramnik was invited to this event. He did not participate, chose not to participate. He was no longer the PCA champion, incidentally. but he chose not to participate. Topalov won in a very convincing fashion. What happened is this was a double round robin, and in the first half of that round robin, Topalov went 6.5 out of 7. He won 6 of his first 7 games. His only draw was to Viswanathan Anand. So that performance in the first half has very rarely been equaled in modern chess. You know, you can think of Karpov at Linares, you can think of Caruana at Sinquefield, you can think of Carlsen at Pearl Springs, but this performance rating in the first half of the tournament was 29 something or another, and his tournament rating for the whole tournament was almost 2,900. So it was very, very strong for him. And in the second half of the tournament, in the second half of the round robin, he just drew his way to victory. The last round didn't even matter, actually. He was clear first by a long shot. So we say Topalov likes to fight for wins, and we say that, you know, he was a big fan of the Sofia rules, which prevented early draws. And yet, I do want to point out that in the second half of this tournament, Topalov had a 17-move draw against Anand, an 18-move draw against Pogar, a 21-move draw against Svidler, and a 24-move draw against Peter Leko. Okay. The couple of the other ones were a lot longer, 40, 50 moves, but it's clear that in the second half, he was content with GM draws and cruise his way to victory, much like we saw Caruana do at Sinquefield. You know, after winning his first 7, rounds, he just decided that he was going to draw his way to victory. This was a shot, around that was heard around the chess world. Topalov was establishing himself as the number 1 rated player in FIDE rankings or in chess rankings and the world champion. Incidentally, I should note, he was not the highest rated player. He was the highest rated active player because Garry Kasparov had retired the year before, but he still had an active rating because it takes a year for your rating to disappear. And Topalov says, I've won my 3rd super tournament. There's all this clamoring to say, well, we should try to reunite the titles. And I misspoke earlier when saying Kramnik wasn't the PCA champion. He was. There's this talk about reuniting the titles by having Topalov play Kramnik. And Topalov said, you know what? I don't think I should play him because I don't think he's as good as I am. I'm in a different class. 60 ELO points. I mean, that's huge at the super GM level. And if someone approached Kramnik and said, someone's 60 ELO points below you wants to challenge you for your title, he would laugh at them. So originally he said he was not going to play against Kramnik for the World Chess Championship. And Kasparov thought the same, that, Topalov has nothing to prove, he's the champion. But he did. He just later decided that he was going to play against Kramnik in the 2006 World Chess Championship, which was seeking for the first time to reunite the titles of the PCA, founded by Short and Kasparov back in 1992, and FIDE. It was also going to be a match play to decide the World Chess Championship for the first time since the 90s, and so in many ways this was historic. It was also very, very controversial. Why? Kramnik jumps out to a very early lead, and then we have a couple of draws, and then game 5. Okay, we have the scandal begins. Topalov's manager, Danailov, who we've known about for a while, has pointed out after round 4 that Kramnik takes up to, and this was an exaggeration, but said that Kramnik takes 50 bathroom breaks per game. And this is suspicious because the moves he plays are almost always exactly what, I don't remember if it was Fritz or Ribka, the engine that they were using at the time. I think it was Fritz. It's almost, he plays 90% of the time, he plays Fritz's best moves after his bathroom breaks. And they went and took pictures of the bathroom and they showed there were cables above the ceiling tiles. And they said that Kramnik must have, access to an engine in the bathroom. And this was the beginning of what has been lovingly called Toiletgate. The picture on the right is completely made up, by the way, but it's some person's rendition of what, what Topalov was alleging. Also, I want to point out at this 2006 World Chess Championship, every single game started D4. And every single game was either a Slav or a Catalan. Every one of them. The only time it's ever happened in the World Chess Championship that they've opened the same way every game. But Toiletgate. Now, what happened was Danailov alleged that this was fishy. FIDE convened an ethics committee to rule on this complaint, and they determined that it was fishy and that instead of having 2 separate private bathrooms, they were going to have 1 communal bathroom. Well, Kramnik said we should stick to the original agreement of the match conditions. I'm not going to play. So he forfeits round 5, just doesn't show up. You see Topalov just sitting there waiting, reminiscent of Fischer, right, in the Fischer-Spassky match. Then the ethics committee, which was headed by Georgios Makropoulos, the current acting head of FIDE, resigned. And they formed a new ethics committee after Kramnik's team complained, and they considered a new ethics complaint that the first ethics complaint was unfair and it was slanderous and it was this, that, and the other, and they overruled the original committee. And then you have this crisis. What do we do about the forfeited game? You remember this is prominent in Fischer-Spassky, right? What do we do about this forfeited game? Does it stand? Does the match continue? This, that, the other. And it actually took Kirsan Yilmazov's intervention to decide the result would stand. The original match conditions would be reinstituted, in other words, private bathrooms, and the match would continue at that current score of 3-2. And it was a closely contested match. You see it goes back and forth. Even for a while, Topalov evens it up and even takes the lead. And then Kramnik wins, draws it even. They draw for the final, and they have to go to rapid tie breaks, and Kramnik wins in a very, very close fashion. And Kramnik, who is rated, I think, 4th in the FIDE rankings at this point, and obviously it's very controversial, but he wins the World Chess Championship. And Topalov remains bitter about this to this day. To this day, he is still upset about this. In fact, to this day, he refuses, and Kramnik, it's mutual, okay? They both have that same animosity. They will not shake hands, ever. And it's funny when you ever see pictures of them, because they have to play matches sometimes. Sometimes they get, they go to these same tournaments and they get paired. But whenever you have pictures taken, this is what they're doing. They're looking away from each other. They before the match starts, and even during the match, they are not making eye contact at all. November 2015, this is a month ago, or even a couple of weeks ago, Topalov is still bitter about this, and he's still saying that current politicians are protecting their favorite, Vladimir Kramnik, and those politicians, one of these days, they're going to be out of the picture, and the truth is going to come to light. And these videotapes that FIDE supposedly destroyed, they're going to resurface. I do want to point out Pogar was not nearly as bitter about Kasparov's touch move when she had perhaps more damning evidence than Topalov is about Kramnik. It's entirely speculative. There was a computer analysis done by a professor at the University of Buffalo in New York, and he basically he's tried to develop a way to use chess algorithm or chess engines to determine if someone is cheating at chess or not. And what he found is, yes, Kramnik did play the computer best move 90% of the time, but most of those were forced moves. So it's not at all surprising that he played those moves. And in his expert opinion, Kramnik was not using engine analysis in the 2006 World Championship. Of course, Topalov would beg to differ. Now, moving on from the 2006, unfortunately, by losing the 2006 World Chess Championship, Kramnik actually won the right to participate in the next candidate cycle in 2007, when there was a double round robin played in Mexico that Anand won. And Anand became the world champion in a tournament that Topalov didn't even get to participate in. Well, there was some stink raised about that. And so what FIDE decided to do, again in their infinite wisdom, is they decided to give Topalov preferential treatment in the following candidate cycle. So in 2009, the winner of the World Chess Cup, Gatakomsky, had to play Topalov before he could challenge Viswanathan Anand for the World Chess Championship. Topalov won that match, fairly convincing fashion. Therefore, Topalov won the right to challenge Viswanathan Anand for the World Chess Championship in 2010, and that match was very, very close. Now, Topalov has a lot of respect for Anand. You know, has been one of the strongest players in the world for half of his 40 years, and the same could actually be said for Topalov now. He has been one of the strongest players in the world, you know, well over half of his life by this point, considering his first win against Kasparov came, you know, when he was half of his current age. And the chess, apparently at this World Chess Championship, was very high level. Khalifman, you know, had rave reviews about the quality of chess, but just said, you know, Topalov got outplayed. He did a lot of work to prepare for the match, but Anand is just a genius. And he went on to have even more superlative praise for Anand, but I've left it out for the sake of fitting everything on one slide. In that match, Anand won and retained his title. Later on, obviously, it was taken by Magnus Carlsen, and they are both candidates in this current cycle, so we'll see what happens in that current cycle. Before we talk about Topalov's prospects for the current candidate cycle ending in March, let's look at our final two games of the evening. This is against Aronian and Kramnik, both at chorus, but different years. And again, with the white pieces, but Topalov is too fun to look at from the white side. So again, I will turn that over to Warren for analysis.
The game against Aronian is notable, by the way, because he's also in the candidates, right? So Topalov is going to have to play him. All right, so yet again, we have a Queen's Indian. After seeing all these games, if I ever played Topalov over the board, I don't think I would play the Queen's Indian against him. So this time Topalov actually plays the way you normally see it, with fianchettoing the bishop and playing this knight e5 idea, right? This is much more kind of mainstream theory. And here is already kind of a turning point. So black has its choice between playing c takes and e takes, and Aronian chose e takes. Now the other option here is you can play c takes, which makes white's forthcoming exchange sacrifice not quite as good. So in the game, takes on d5, rook e1, and c5. Now rook takes. So in exchange for this rook, white gets a great square for the knight, and the c6 and e4 pawns are also going to be weak. And white does not have anything crushing, but the problem black has is if black loses that c pawn, these c and d pawns are going to be both passers, right? So the potential for white here is pretty huge. So queen e1. Going after this guy. And f3. So white would be very pleased if black took, because now we win the c6 pawn, right? Queen e6, knight c6. I mean, white's basically just winning here. So b4. And now white to play. How can white continue the initiative? You got to move the knight, because if you allow bishop takes e5, then our flexible pawns are gone, right?
Knight takes c6, e5.
Exactly. We can just take, because after black takes, we have the discovery, and after we take the bishop, we have this mobile pawn pair that's so strong, right? So queen f1. So on this square, we don't get tempoed by a rook going to the 7th rank. Queen e2. And now Topalov finds a really nice move here. There's really only one good choice, by the way, too. Defending this bishop is awkward, right? Exactly. Yeah. I think this was a novelty at the time of the game, so Aronian maybe hadn't expected it or hadn't seen it, I'm not sure. yeah, a previous game had seen bishop c1, and that didn't work out for white, right? But this is kind of a neat move. So queen g4. Now white gets the bishop to a much better diagonal where it supports the pawns on this 7th and 6th rank.
Bishops are great at escorting pawns through.
Oh,
they really,
yeah.
it's
Topalov really believes in his bishops. And now white to play. What do we do here?
Maybe rook takes.
Exactly. Giving up a second exchange because these passed pawns are going to cost both of black rooks.
It must be pushed.
Queen at 5. I mean, there's really not much black can do, right? If you play rook down to the 7th, white just to play this one, he just takes.
Yeah.
If you play the other one, he queens, right? So it's hardly much black can do. Threatening mate. Kind of forcing black's hand to exchange queens because otherwise we have queen h6, right? And now he just resigned, right? If not rook e2, it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, rook c8, white can just play bishop f4, followed by d7, and each pawn will cost black a rook, so black will be facing, an uphill battle, right? 2 bishops for nothing. So pretty sweet positional victory there. I mean, it's not entirely positional; it's pretty sharp, but really nice exchange sacrifice. Not unprecedented, but really nice finish. Yeah, this was 2. Yeah, although the first one is much more interesting than the second one. So, any questions on this one? All right. Now his game as Kramnik is much sharper.
Vengeance.
Yeah, this game was fun. I remember reading about this in New in Chess back when he did this. So we have a Moscow. I mean, this is one of the sharpest opening variations in chess, right? The Moscow, the Botvinnik, they're incredibly complicated because of the imbalance they have, right?
Knight takes f7.
So we have an incredibly imbalanced position, right? Black has basically a clear extra pawn, right? White really can't get it back. But in exchange, black has weakened both wings of the board, and white has a big advantage in development and central control, right? It's really imbalanced, right? I mean, probably only the Botvinnik is more imbalanced, right? I mean, not many chess openings are this complex. So bishop e2, knight d7. This is all, this is all pretty normal. Now knight e5. Now here's kind of a turning point already. So nowadays, I mean, black has more than one option here, but h5 is kind of the preferred move nowadays. The reason is it stops knight f7, basically. So now knight takes f7 is not so attractive because after black takes, e5 may look dangerous, but black can play h4. And this is good for black to open up the h-file, right? So this is not nearly as good a version of that sacrifice. H5 coincidentally stops white from playing any possible ideas like that as well, right? But Kramnik chose bishop g7, and here's where Topalov goes in for this knight takes f7 sacrifice. It is pretty speculative, but Kramnik's king being so awkwardly placed gives Topalov a nice initiative. So takes, e5, and knight e4. So this d6 square is incredibly difficult to control, right? So king e7. Now, it's hard to really suggest much else. The problem with moving the king towards the king side is that that's where white's going to open up by playing f4 at some point, right? If you play king g8, simply bishop g4, and white's going to be aiming to play f4 and open up that king side. So it's not so clear where to put that king. So he decided to head for the queen side, basically. So now knight d6, and already things get interesting. So he played queen b6, although if you look at it with Stockfish, Stockfish wants to play rook b8. And instead of putting the queen on the queen side, Stockfish wants to put the queen on the king side. So it's kind of bizarre. Stockfish wants to play moves like queen g8. Kind of weird, but I guess it makes sense in some way. So queen b6, bishop g4, putting pressure on e6. Now queen c2. The threat of queen g6 is pretty deadly. So black doesn't really have much choice but to try to undermine this knight. Holding on to the bishop is really not much of an option. Trying to open up a second front on the queen side, right? This knight's immune for now because of queen d7, right? Keeping queen side closed. Now this threatens immediately rook c4 because of the threat of the fork on d6.
Oh, wow.
So c3. Take. Trying to keep it close still.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the fork on d6 back there. What was that?
So white threatens rook takes c4 right away because the knight c6 fork picks it back up. Exactly. So that's white c3. Now he's trying to keep the queen side closed. If you take on c3 with, say, the pawn, then we have knight d6 followed by rook b1. That looks kind of scary. So b3, but now white pushes the d5 knight out of the way.
Ooh.
We see a queen sacrifice. And the problem black has in these resulting positions is white has a pair of passed e-pawns that give white a lot of counterplay, and black doesn't have the same to hope for. So it's essentially giving up a queen for a rook and a piece. So white already won the piece. And now I win the rook, right? And again, the secondary problem black has is these central pawns right here. And because of the mate threat on the back rank, black also has issues. Rook c4. Unfortunately, black couldn't keep an eye on e6, right? Threatening a5. Threatening the queen, right? Now black has no passed pawn. Although black mopped that one up, white has a secondary one ready to hop right in. The threat of rook b8 mate means the pawn is immune. a6. And now he just resigned, right? If knight takes e5,
Knight c7.
right, knight c7, followed by mate, right?
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's hard to say how to stop it, right? If you play queen d5, we still fork. If queen e4, then what?
Many ways. One is to check on c7 and b7 and getting queen.
Yeah,
Or
just
this,
bishop d4, yeah. Also death, right? So yeah, he just resigned at this point. Yeah, pretty beautiful speculative sacrifice, that knight takes f7 move.
Do you think when he sacked his queen that he saw far enough to see that those centralized pawns were going to be unstoppable? Or were going to require so much material that he was going to get more than...
Yeah, I doubt he stressed out much about it. I mean, we can see how much time he took. But yeah, I don't think it's a difficult queen sacrifice to go on. So going back to that. So okay, after rook f8, yeah, he thought for like 8 minutes. Yeah, I don't think that's a tough decision. If anything, it's a good option. You can't keep the queen on the 7th rank because they'll keep attacking you, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, going to g6, your queen's not really doing much there, right? So to me, it just makes a lot of sense to get all your pieces in the game to just keep the initiative going with taking the knight. See, I mean, it is a commitment giving up the queen, but I doubt he really saw much issue with it. So any other questions on that? All right.
So in most of these profiles of the various candidates, I've tried to give you a little idea of how they might fare in the candidates tournament by showing you their head-to-head records. So with Topalov, I'll show you the same. He does have a somewhat lopsided record against Caruana in that he doesn't tend to do very well against Caruana, at least not yet. But against the other candidates, he is pretty close, slightly better, slightly worse, but certainly in contention, unlike Karyakin, who we saw last month, who didn't have a very good head-to-head record. And his head-to-head record against Carlsen is not that great, considering some of his wins against Carlsen came early in Carlsen's career when he was 17, 18 years old. In the last couple of years, he's not fared very well. There you see him at Sinkafeld 2014 in the post-mortem where Carlsen points out a winning continuation that Topalov missed, and instead they drew the game. One of the best reaction shots ever captured on camera. So Topalov, at least from a head-to-head record, seems to have a pretty good shot, and rating would certainly indicate that he is one of the best players in the world right now. But his tournament performance this year has been somewhat spotty. He won Norway Chess 2015, very good result, but he did not do well at Sinkafeld 2015. He did not do well at London Chess Classic that just concluded. In fact, I think he finished last in that field. And he doesn't really feel that his chances are that great, either in the candidates tournament or against Carlsen. He thinks that Carlsen frankly outmatches him in 8 or 9 categories out of 10, if there are such a thing. And he thinks that that the person to beat Carlsen is probably going to be someone younger, like maybe a Giri or a Caruana. So, or maybe someone else a little later on. So he doesn't speak very confidently about the candidates tournament or about facing Magnus Carlsen himself. But we do have to remember a couple of things about Topalov. He is very competitive, not just at chess. He's an avid soccer player. He's an avid table tennis player, and he's competitive at all of them. 1. 2, Topalov is somewhat spotty in his record in that he's a big believer in luck. One thing that draws me to chess is I don't feel that there's really any luck, but Topalov really does believe that there's quite a bit of luck, and I will respect his opinion on that. He certainly is more experienced than I am, but he believes there's quite a bit of luck in the psychological aspect of the game. So in that sense, he could go in with a strong sense of confidence, and it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or he could go in with a strong sense of trepidation, and that could also be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the third factor I want to point out is Topalov is a strong believer in moving on past your losses. He doesn't, at least he says, that he doesn't really analyze his wins or losses. He says that he forgets about them and moves on. Now, that could be a positive or a negative. It could mean that the way you recover from a poor performance at the London Chess Classic is just forget about it and move on, focus on the candidates. Or it could be that he's being a little disingenuous and it actually does weigh on him a little more than he says. But if he's accurate in his estimation, it could be that he is able to just move past poor performances at Sinkafeld, London Chess Classic, and focus entirely on the candidates and show why he is the number 2 ranked player in the world. Time will tell. The London Chess Classic, a lot of people think it wasn't representative of the performance of the eventual candidates. People have said maybe the candidates themselves who are participating were refraining from revealing their opening prep that they're working on for the candidates tournament. There's also the criticism that they were not playing very aggressively. There were a lot of draws in the tournament. Even though we say Topalov finished last, it could be that that is not a fair representation of how he will do in the candidates tournament himself. And his past record has shown that he has, won the candidates. He's finished second. He's finished last. It's kind of hard to anticipate how he'll do. So he'll be one definitely to watch. All right, for this presentation, can't hardly see it here, but I relied on a lot of mostly interviews. Lots of different interviews with Topalov going back to about 2003 all the way through 3 weeks ago. So I was trying to see how his thinking was 15 years or 12 years ago and how he's thinking now. I also looked at his website, which is not very well developed, unfortunately, but at least he has one. Looking at you, Fabiano. At least he has one. And so I was able to get some information, and fortunately Topalov speaks several different languages. He speaks Bulgarian, he speaks Spanish, he speaks English. And so there are lots of interviews with him in different languages. And so you can find plenty of YouTube videos of him, giving postmortems and giving interviews to journalists. He's one that does not shy away from the camera like some other players out there. So those are the sources I used. Obviously, if you have any questions about Topalov, I'd be glad to try to answer them. By no means consider myself an expert, but I was interested in learning a lot more about him. Going into this, I knew about the 2006 thing. I knew that he was world champion when it was a divided title and that he was a strong player. But actually, I was interested to learn what I was unable to learn, and that's we don't know much about his childhood. Before about age 15, it's very vague, and that's the first time we've encountered that in one of these presentations. Carl, why don't we have pictures of him when he was 3, but I would challenge you, try to find a picture of Topalov before about 1994, 1995. I couldn't do it, at least at a glance. There are no books published about Topalov either, at least in the English language. Yeah, so magazine articles for sure, but he's a little mysterious. Any questions?
I got one.
Sure.
You mentioned about the restrictions that FIDE and tournaments have placed on drawing by saying you can't draw after 30 moves.
Yeah, the Sofia rules, yeah.
And how Topalov himself drew out...
in 2006, or 2005, yeah.
I mean, the way I look at it, once a game gets started, if the two people agree to a draw, there shouldn't be anybody else that has a say in it. And as I understand it, there have been other attempts to restrict draws dating back quite a number of years, and people got around it by playing openings with perpetual check in it. I mean, what's your opinion of all
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about Topalov, and then I'll actually defer to experts that know more about this than I do. But Topalov in 2005, if you look at some of his games, some of them that he drew very quickly, they were openings where they just exchanged off a bunch of pieces very quickly. And you had like rook bishop on either side with equal pawns at move 18, and then they just agreed to a draw. So you could argue that that's a theoretical draw, I suppose. But he played, it looked like in 2005, yes, there were some early draws, but sometimes one way to get around those rules is just to play an opening where you exchange off a bunch of stuff.
Like the exchange Slav, where everything gets...
Yeah, you just go to an endgame very quickly, and then all of a sudden you agree to a draw within 30 minutes. So yeah, I mean, if you put in those Sofia rules and say, has to be a perpetual check, or it has to be a 3-move repetition, or it has to be a known theoretical draw, even if you implement those rules, I think GMs, if they want to, can pretty easily steer a game to one of those positions. But that said, we have people who know more about this than I do, so Warren, Hedinn, I would welcome your thoughts on this. I know you don't like playing for draws, for example.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the ideas behind these rules is try to just not necessarily have like hard and fast rules to stop draws, but just encourage them to play more fighting chess. Like I remember, so I played in the U.S. Junior stuff in St. Louis, and they had us all sign like these little contracts or whatever, and part of it was like so not only were you not supposed to draw in under 30 moves, but you were also supposed to fight out games, right? So you wouldn't just, repeat moves in the opening like this, right? So they had a vague clause in there about playing, competitive chess, So, the idea is you want to make the organizer happy, right? The sponsor. Because for all these top tournaments, I mean, they're paying these people to play whether they win first prize or not.
That's true.
I mean, first prize might be $70K. The last prize will be something like $30K. They're basically just paying them to play chess. So you want your sponsor to be happy. They're not paying you to go there and play an exchange Slav and then agree to draw, right? So.
There's been another attempt at doing something about this by changing the scoring so you get less than 50% for a draw. That's been done in a couple of tournaments as well.
Yeah, I think it was like you get 2 points for a win, and then it was like...
Or 1.4 for a draw or something. where 2 draws is worth less than 1 win and a loss.
Yeah, I forget the numbers. It was like 2 points for a draw and 3/4 of a point. Sorry, 2 points for a win, 3/4 of a point for a draw, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
So a
to
draw
me,
is not
that's
very
more
important.
legit in the sense that the organizer wants to get fighting games, and it doesn't prevent people from agreeing to draws, but there's a penalty that they take. So 10 draws is not the same as 5 wins and 5 losses. I mean, that seems to me a more reasonable way of doing it. I don't
Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, this of course has been discussed for many years. I think that objectively chess is a draw, so the sort of counter argument for encouraging results like non-draws is that the players should not be penalized for playing high-quality chess. You know, maybe you are black and you could even play a perfect game, and you know, if you get 3/4 of a point, then you know you are not going to do very well. So, but I think Topalov said in some interview that the Sofia rule helped him because then he didn't think about draws. But then I sort of remember that in the last tournament that he won, the
Norway chess?
yes, there I think he played against, was it Aaron in the last round with White, and that was also a draw right from the opening. So yes, so I guess, you know, sort of everybody is right that, you know, if people really want something, they find a way.
Who was it Mamedyarov who proposed the rule about if there's a draw, the players play again, they switch colors and they start the clock where they left off?
Yeah, so I can't remember if it was Mamedyarov or Kazandanov. He had an open letter on Chess Days, and it was about
Probably Kazandanov.
Kazandanov.
Yeah, it might have been Kazandanov.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his idea was that chess would be like tennis. You know, you keep playing until there's a victor. You know, like someone may win, you know, the set, but that doesn't mean they win, you know, the whole match. You keep playing. So I think it's an interesting idea. It's at least worth trying. I'd like to see it. So his idea was that, you know, chess would be more exciting to people if there was always a winner. You know, you don't see Federer and Nadal play and then it's a draw.
Topalov is on record for saying that there are really 2 main things working against excitement in chess. One of them is the prevalence of engines for preparation, because there used to be a huge disparity between the number 5 person in the world and the number 25 person in the world. But now that gap is really narrowed because of the role of training with engines. And he said the other factor is the reestablishment of slow time controls, that slow time controls really favor preparation as opposed to calculation. So according to Topalov, the way to make chess, to increase the number of decisive results in chess would be to decrease the time control. And we certainly see that in tournaments going to rapids and blitzes and Armageddons and tiebreaks. But at the same time, I can tell you as a coach, when I see a tournament go down to a blitz game to decide, you know, such a big result, it's somewhat disappointing. And I'm sure for the players in a World Chess Championship, if it has to go to a rapid game, that's also very difficult. But
that's the same thing with football or soccer.
Yeah.
You have
or
penalty kicks.
NHL hockey.
Nobody likes to see that.
Right.
What happens at a draw?
Yeah, I'm not advocating a return to Kasparov-Kramnik, 1984, but I don't know, I don't know what the solution is. Karpov, sorry. Yeah. Where you have 18 straight draws or whatever, in a match that takes 5 months before it's called. So I don't know what the result is. I think what's nice though is that different tournaments are trying different rule sets, and you can have a laboratory there to see what works. I mean, they did that at the MTel Masters with implementing the Sofia rules, and saw how that worked in terms of sponsorship dollars and public interest. They do more of that.
I mean, yeah. Speaking personally, I find the rapid playoffs really exciting. So I remember earlier this year, Anand and Nakamura tied for the Zurich tournament, and they played an Armageddon game for the playoff, right? So black has draw odds. It was 5 minutes to 4 minutes, and that was really exciting to watch.
So what is an Armageddon game?
So I was just saying, Armageddon game is just one game, it's a tiebreaker. So black has draw odds, so that means if black draws or wins, then black wins essentially. And black has less time though. So white has, in this case it was fixed. White has 5 minutes, black has 4 minutes. Now I've even seen it be more interesting in some tournaments, like
you can bid on the time.
Exactly. So I was at the World Open one year, and I forget who was playing in the playoff. It was like Nakamura and someone else, and they bid on the time. So they start out with 45 minutes, and you bid on how much time you would be willing to play with black, and whoever bids lower wins. So if you bid say 30 minutes, and I bid say 28 minutes. That means I get black and draw.
Sealed bids, by the way.
So you can. So it isn't luck of the draw that establishes.
Exactly. So you don't just get randomly told you're black and you have draws, because some people consider that a big advantage.
But it would be hard to be sure that it would be fair to both sides.
So that's kind of the bidding.
Okay. That's fascinating.
The bidding is really fun because if you bid too low, it's like 20 minutes. It's like you got less than half the time of your opponent. It's kind of hard. But if you bid too high, draw odds is a distinct advantage. 2 results you win. So,
okay.
I find that much more interesting when they bid. I think that's cool.
Thank you. That's fascinating.
So next month we will look at. Do you want to do Geary or Aronian?
Do Aronian.
Okay, we'll do Lev on Aronian next month. That'll put us in position to do Anish Geary at the end of February. Candidates tournament starts in March, so that will address all the candidates. You can hopefully have your favorites all squared away by the time we start the candidates tournament in March, and then that'll be some fun viewing. And then after that, I've mentioned that we've got a couple of tournaments that we might want to cover. I'm still collaborating with the match photographer for USSR versus the World #2. He's sending me lots of photos that have never been published, so that should be exciting to put together a slideshow on that. That'll probably be March or April, and then we'll see where we go from there. But appreciate you guys coming out tonight for sure.
Thank you.